Man, this was a wild one coming off, man. This the game of the year, I would say, at the moment for the Bulls. Big win. I did not think that they were gonna get it. But but we're gonna talk about it. Me and Gabe here running with WARR post game, Bulls and Clippers. It's hard to pick a place to start, man. But like I said, this was a big win. I'm gonna say though, when I had towards the end of that Nets Bucks game, I had both games on, and I was looking at the way that the Nets and the Bucks played, and I was just looking at the way the Bulls was playing at the time, and it wasn't a good comparison to me. It looked like the Bulls was running on the old rebuilt engine. I tweeted this, and the other two teams in Brooklyn was running on a Hemi, running on some fresh Hemis or something. Man, those teams were going at it, and the Bulls just didn't seem like they had the want to, let alone the execution. But they just weren't going in the right way to even compete with this Clippers team that was right in front of them. It just wasn't looking like a good outlook for the Bulls. But by the end of that game, they wound up giving it all. And I'm trying to get, what was the final score? I'm trying to get it up on my phone.
135-130.
Yeah, so they were down like 11 with like 4 minutes left. Mm-hmm. They overtake that lead, and they go ahead and really outplay them in the old overtime. They were given a good deal of help towards the end of that of regulation. I don't know what that was about with those two fouls, those two late fouls, especially the PG foul. But it seemed like when you look at PG not playing really much at all in that OT, Stacy and Amin spoke about it on the broadcast. It seemed like they were holding him. They had got enough of him in that game. The Clippers did, and they're easing them back. So people, we were talking about how it was like, there's some talk coming to the game about how it was bad luck that the Bulls had to face this team with PG, but they got enough luck where they didn't get the whole PG, and they didn't get them at maximum in this game, even though he was still pretty good. Jackson was very good in this game, and yeah. And they had some other stuff for the Bulls. They, especially early on, they seemed to really, their length and their height just really was outdoing the Bulls in a lot of ways. And it didn't seem like a good matchup for a while. But I'll give it to you, Gabe. Man, what do you think allowed the Bulls to eventually take this one?
Meltdowns by the Clippers by the stretch. Defensively. And I think you talk about the PG foul against DeMar, which sent the game into overtime. But I go back to the Terrence Mann foul. Away from the ball, to give them 2 free throws plus the possession. And at the time you had a 5-point lead, that you just can't make those mistakes. And that's why you saw Ty Lue, animated on the sidelines about it. That was a big pivotal play that changed the course of the ball game. But I think the biggest X factor in the game for the Bulls, in spite of the Clippers' meltdowns laid down the stretch, was Pat Williams. Pat Williams coming off the bench, getting a double-double, making things happen, playing off of guys, cutting to the rim, making some catch-and-shoot threes to keep them within striking distance early in that fourth quarter. That was huge. And to me, he's really the unsung hero of the game. Everybody's going to look at DeMar and what he did. It's incredible. Yes, he definitely sparked the comeback. But what Pat was doing, this is the type of game that you could build off of. You have a lot of Bulls fans out there, and I had conversations with Drew and a couple other people in the spaces a week ago about Pat. They're giving up on him. and they're not realizing that he's just not getting into action. Similar to Paul George, who this is his second game back. This is Pat's like fifth or sixth game back, even though he's been back a little while longer. Like he's just not getting his feet wet. And defensively, he played well tonight. For the most part, outside of being late on a couple of rotations, he fared well. But anytime guys are getting doubled and he's serving as an active cutter to the rim, like we saw with Caruso, found him on a cut inside or early part of the overtime, and he's knocking down catch and shoot threes, and he's taking them, which is what you really want to see from him, as opposed to being passive when he has open looks. That's key. That's key. And to me, I couldn't speak enough about how great he was tonight off of the bench, especially when you consider that Billy Donovan only played 4 guys off the bench, and they only played a 9-man rotation tonight.
It was a playoff-like rotation.
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah, and so they that's really what's encouraging to me. Like they are taking these games seriously now. They know what position they're in, and they know what they need to do to fulfill themselves in this next week of play. I think this was a potential turnaround game for this team. That they're not complete yet, but they're getting their pieces back the way that they want them. And when you look at it, it was very vital that P. Will was in so many ways the X factor in this game, because, like you say, we've been waiting on him, and it's been rough. That weight's been rough, and in some ways maybe we've been impatient, but
very much so.
This has been this is a guy we know has talent, and we know he can make plays. He can do certain things on both ends of the court that are special, and we get to see a flash of that tonight. Him just being aware to get in that corner and be in the position for the shot, let alone making it in that overtime. Like, that's special stuff there, man. Him getting those dunks, that cut to the rim when he was able to get that free back. I mean, that get free and get that easy basket. That's good stuff, man. That's the type of stuff that you want to see from you want to see from a 20-year-old guy, man, and who is entering his first significant playoff-like action.
This is gonna be a key experience for him, and all of those guys. But what this game should really show the Bulls organization as well as Bulls faithful is how important it is to get home court advantage in round one. Now you're only, I believe they're only a game. They may be like a couple of games back behind Philly. Philly's lost 3 in a row, with the loss to Detroit tonight. Yeah, you got the majority of your games down the stretch at the United Center. And as we know, the Bulls feed off of that crowd. And I think that crowd has played a tremendous role in a lot of these games being reversed and flipped and giving the Bulls a chance to win a lot of these games. You can tell those guys feed off that crowd a lot. Even Kobe, earlier tonight played fairly well and was active defensively. It's something about the energy, I think, of this team that picks up when they're at home. And when you're seeking to cement yourself as a true playoff force to be reckoned with, you want to have as many advantages as you can, especially when you're a young team like the Bulls, mostly with a few, seasoned veterans that have been there and done that. All of these games are big, and this is a huge win considering when you got Miami coming in on the back end to start the weekend on Saturday night. So to be able to steal one, which in my opinion they did, and to go into the game against Miami at the UC this Saturday night, that's a big deal.
Yes, I'm getting. Like you said, it's a game difference. I was about to say 2 games, but they haven't updated on Google yet. But like you say, Philly lost. There was 2 games coming into today. The difference between Philly and the Bulls. Philly lost today. There's some issues there, especially with Harden. We'll maybe get into a little bit of that before we go off. But they lost. Bulls won, so it's a 1-game difference now between them in 4 and 5, respectively. So, that's some good stuff there, Gabe. I was gonna throw it to Farrell here. You good? You,
Yeah, I'm good, man.
okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
get situated.
Yeah. I mean, just go ahead and give your overall thoughts, man, on this one, man. It was a roller coaster tonight, man.
It was playoff intensity. In the playoffs is when you see guys start to cramp up, and I think we saw Zach go down late in the fourth and stretching his calf out. We saw DeMar clenching a couple times, and I'm not really sure what he's dealing with. But at this point in the season, everybody's dealing with something, and the fact that they were able to grit through that extended minutes, were able to maintain the intensity, and this was a big win. They needed it. As you mentioned earlier, Cal, like this was the first game in I think game stretch at home. So
Yeah.
being able to start it on the right foot and establish some momentum out the gates and get some confidence against a tough opponent, it was big to see them, fight through and get that victory in overtime. The
And
Bulls,
they're all playoff teams in this stretch.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
So,
for sure. I
yeah.
mean, we've
So
seen the Bulls have games like this and then get into overtime and then they come out flat and then they lose, which is a big, those are big letdowns. But the fact that they were able to win big, DeMar put the team on his back, and put up the 50 wings, extra crispy. You dig?
yes,
So yeah,
indeed.
it was an exciting game, man. Playoff intensity. I'm glad they pulled it out.
Yeah, I was shout out to Law Murray who covers the Clippers for the Athletic. I've been following him, and he said that they were 0-3 in overtime. The Clippers were, so they fought a 0-4 this year in overtime. Not a good look for them, but they're still working through their stuff, and you look at that team, that's still a dangerous team. They, you know, maybe they're going to have to wait till next year to fully be the team that they want to be. Especially if Kawhi doesn't come back. But they still got a lot to offer, and they pushed the Bulls tonight.
Yeah.
You can't argue that, and some of that has to do with the Bulls not necessarily playing to the way that they want, but or to a certain standard. But at the same time, you gotta make when teams aren't playing to their certain standard, you gotta make them pay. And like you said, Reggie Jackson, Morris, they was out there doing that tonight. I'm trying to get this tweet up from my man Rob Schaefer. Transition to a next point here. Give me a second. But yeah, what did you no, I'm yeah. The point I was going into was Rob had I guess going from the press conference tonight, he was mentioning how P. Will was switched on to Marcus Morris, who started out 6 of 7 with his shooting early on. He was hurting the Bulls, and P. Will sort of was used to slow him down a little bit. Did y'all notice that?
Yeah, I picked it up real quick because one thing that the Clippers did a good job of early was attacking the Bulls 4-guard lineup by getting them inside. Specifically, not only Morris but George. They got a lot of matchups 1-on-1 with Caruso on the island, and they were, it was like shooting over a chair, from a low chair, and they was getting
Mm-hmm.
money. And I think that was a smart adjustment on Billy's part, and that's why Pat is going to be such a big piece for the Bulls come playoff time, because he gives them so much size and length that the other guys such as Caruso and Javonte Green, while they're great defenders in their own right, won't be able to give because they're undersized, even though they may be able to provide a little bit of girth. But they had a significant height advantage over them. And, they just was shooting over the top, just being able to get into, their actions real easy and smooth with no resistance. And Pat, definitely interrupted that and changed that, and was even switching on the bigs and making good rotations and whatnot. I caught that very quickly because in the first quarter they got annihilated because they keep playing small, and the change had to be made.
Yeah. More reporting from Rob. He said, like I said, he said, P. Will was switched over. Donovan, admitted to that in the press conference, and he also mentioned, that they're being mindful of Caruso's minutes, because of his back.
Mhm.
And he mentioned DeMar apologizing to him because of missing the potential game winning free throw of the missed one of the three that he had at the end of regulation. And Donovan responded by saying that the Bulls wouldn't have been in overtime, of course, without his contributions. Well, I guess the thing we gotta sort of come to grips with here is, the Bulls have had an MVP since Jordan, of course, but you know this really, and DeMar isn't going to get the MVP this year, but this really has to go down as the most special season by an individual Bull outside of Michael Jordan. I mean, I think we have to say that at this point, right?
In my
Since Derrick
opinion,
Rose,
you say Gabriel, you say since Rose, I say since top three MVP season for Joe Kim. I mean, for me, that was a pretty special season.
it
All
was, yeah.
things considered,
Mhm.
yeah.
I know what you're talking about. Yeah, that's true.
But y'all not willing to put it above those seasons yet, though.
I put it above Joe's.
Yeah,
Just from
I
the
kind of
just from the standpoint the team is in a much higher place in the standings. Now you can attribute that because he had a better partner in crime with Zach in the fold, whereas Joakim was doing a lot of that as a necessity because
sure.
of guys being in and out of the lineup with injuries and so forth. But to me, if you're talking about the top individual seasons all time in Bulls history, I probably would say 95, 96 Jordan, um 10, 11 Rose, um 93, 94 Scotty, and I would probably put DeMar's fourth. And then you could include Noah's campaign, which I believe was in 13, 14,
Mhm.
or actually for 14, 15, one of those years. But
Yeah, I think so.
top four, like what DeMar's doing is incredible, because what DeMar's doing is it's not a single fourth quarter that I've ever watched in the last 10 years of Bulls basketball, probably since Derek had his MVP season, where I'm like, you know what? Because of that guy right there, they got a chance. And DeMar gives you that. With the way he's been playing, the way he's able to get to his spots, and to watch him, in action a couple of times, live up close in person, you can tell that crowd just feeds off of him. And yeah, he cemented himself in Bulls all-time history with the season that he's had. That can't be disputed.
Yeah, amazing. He was at a season high with when we hit 46, but he ends up getting that 50 piece like Pharaoh said, man. It's amazing, man. It truly is. But but it's interesting too. Like I said, we know that he's not going to get MVP in spite of this, though, because you can look at people like Giannis and what he did tonight too. In that amazing game with the Nets, he becomes the all-time leading scorer for the Bucks in that game, by the way. But passing Kareem. But this was a crazy night. Like I said, I started. At a certain point, I was resigned to the Bulls losing tonight, and I was just like enjoying the Nets Bucks game. But you still got those teams in this East. You still got Boston. You still got Miami, but I feel a lot better about the Bulls after this game tonight, about their ability to compete with those teams and have the motor that those teams gonna bring to the playoffs.
Yeah.
So that's just I'm just throwing that point out there. I guess I was gonna get a little bit into the other action from tonight, but I don't know if y'all want to jump on that or follow up on that.
Yeah, I like to expand on the Pat Williams thing, just because we talked about it in the pregame, and to be a fly on the wall, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I wish I could have heard how that conversation at halftime went. Coaches make decisions, but oftentimes, they make a decision in their mind, and then they often look for cues from the player to see, how a guy may be responding. So, Pat, we were thinking about maybe starting you in the second half, and we talk a lot about, Pat's temperament, and I would have loved to see his reaction yeah, coach put me in, or was did he ramp up a little bit? I didn't catch the audio, but I did see in the lower third when KC reported that Pat was starting in the second half. I didn't realize that he went scoreless in the first, and so was this partly because we were monitoring Caruso, partly we really need to figure out a way to light a fire under this kid. So I wish I could have been a fly on the wall for that halftime conversation. It was nice to see him respond though, man. I mean, he didn't like light up the stat sheet, but he made some loud plays, especially that dunk. And moving forward, hey man, we talked about Javante getting out there trying to catch bodies every time he gets an opportunity. If Pat could just get a little bit of that, and get a taste of that, like it's like Stacy said, you see a dog, you give a dog, raw meat for the first time, you know what I'm saying? Like he acquires that taste. And so maybe for Pat, maybe this was one of those moments where moving forward, we see a little bit more of that, a little bit more of that. And then in the playoffs, when the intensity ramps up, we see even more of that, and that catapults how he approaches the game moving forward now as a professional.
I'm gonna take a look at some stats right quick and see what else sort of pops out. Zach winds up with 21, 5 assists and 4 rebounds. Nicola, 22 points and 14 rebounds. P. Will, 12 rebounds with his 10 assists. Kobe, 11 points. And, you know, Javante, of course, so much what he does doesn't show up on the stat sheet. But, Io, Caruso, you combine them, 15. Caruso with 7 assists on his own. Tristan, 4 rebounds, six rebounds, that's it, and 4 points. So, pretty much a lot of different contributions from different guys. And like I said, you get that all NBA, uh, dominance from DeMar on top. A couple guys with 20 below him. That's a good way to get to 130 and to compete with a team like the Clippers. So really just like I say, game like you say, they stole this one. So when you can steal there's it's sort of a bittersweetness to it, or you can look at it a certain way when you steal the game, but the good thing more than anything is that you got that win. And, that's like I say with the East as it is right now with the playoffs a week plus away, you want to win, and that's what the Bulls showed tonight, that they want to win, and that they're not afraid of it. So that's what's good to me about tonight.
Most certainly. And these are the type of wins sometimes that you have to get. Sometimes you have to steal some wins. And anytime you could do that against a team like the Clippers, even with Paul George in his second game back, a well-coached team under Tyronn Lue, those guys are gonna come in and compete. Have one of the best bench units in the league, which they showcased very well tonight. Hardenstein played very well. Luke Kennard, was real nice early and sharp for them. That's huge. And you will take it, especially when every single night from here on out, when a team comes into the United Center, they're a playoff team. You got Miami, you got Boston, you got Charlotte, Milwaukee. It's like it's so many teams, and they got one more game left with Milwaukee. I think coming up on Tuesday of next week. So that's
Yep.
that's big. And you got to take them. You got to take them where you can get them this time of year, especially when you're still fighting for seeding and home court advantage is still on the line, which, in my opinion, can really help the Bulls in a major way. Even if they're not able to get it through the first 2 rounds, at least getting it through the first round. I don't think a lot of teams are going to want to come in here knowing that this city hasn't seen playoff basketball in 5 years. The fans are going to be ready and really excited about that.
I mean, the record still tells you everything. The Bulls play a lot better here than they do on the road. So, and like you say, all that too, those intangibles are there in the United Center and the crowd and all that. So, it would be great if they can get in that 4. That's pretty much the ceiling. But if they can get there, that'll mean a lot, like you say, for that first round. But yeah, I ain't gonna keep us too long with this one. But like I said, I did want to sort of do a little bit more talk about the other games tonight. There are 4 other games tonight, and you had the Pistons beating the Sixers again. A bad loss for those Sixers, 102-94. Like I said, the great game in Brooklyn, 120-119. That went to overtime. The Bucks, in some ways, sort of stole that one, especially when you consider that Middleton was, kicked out the game. I lost some cash off that. But he got a flagrant 2 in the second half and got knocked out of that one. The Hawks, they asserting themselves quite a bit, 131-107, beating Cleveland. Cleveland seems to be set up for that play-in tournament now. But like I say, the Bulls and Jazz and Lakers going at it now. Lakers losing again, of course. But I don't know anything from the other games that sort of noticeable to y'all. I think I saw a little bit of it on Twitter already. I think the big thing for me is that Sixers game, of course, especially as it relates to the Bulls. You got Harden had a bad second half apparently in that game, and a little bit of a call out from Doc after that game. We may be seeing things move in cycles, as Q-Tip said once upon a time. Like I said, that'll be great for the Bulls if some dysfunction is setting in with that team, but it'll be kind of tough for the Sixers. Not a good time.
Yeah, I'd be interested to pay some closer attention to just individually how Joel Embiid ends the season, right? Like, we know that there's that cluster of teams in 1 through 4, and ranking is gonna play a factor. Everybody's trying to avoid Brooklyn, but at the same time, there still could potentially be some matchups at that 2-7, 3-6 that could get dangerous. And we've seen Joel struggle with conditioning, struggle with being able to withstand in the playoffs. So I mean, he's had an MVP year, but he's also had a lot put on him. Not just physically but mentally, with the whole Ben Simmons saga in the first half of the season and having to expend so much energy just to keep Philly in the hunt. So those minutes have a way of compounding on players, especially big men. Are we seeing Joel starting to finally have some in-season attrition, and it's catching up with him at the wrong time? If that's the case, that's not good for Philadelphia. We know Doc's history in the playoffs. I hate to call him out, but he's dealt with these types of situations in other teams in the past, and his schematically he hasn't been able to overcome those issues. So it could I don't know, man. You tell me. Let me hear y'all opinions on the Joel piece, but it could be just like bad luck, bad at the worst time for them.
Well, he today. Sorry. I was just gonna say today at 37 and 15, it's pretty much the story of the season for him. Like, it's the reason why he's a top MVP candidate, because he pretty much had to do everything for that team.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I'm not really too worried about Joel Embiid. Joel Embiid is, to me, if you're somebody who is new to the NBA, it's like several stars I would always recommend people to always see. And he's always at the top of the list, because every single week you're going to get at least multiple 30 and 10 games from him. I do worry about him in the playoffs as well, because the game does slow down. And yeah, big men, the minutes and so forth, it could take a pile on them. So to speak. But the biggest X factor to me for Philadelphia is Tobias Harris.
Mm-hmm.
Now he had a solid game tonight where I think he went like 6 for 9 from the field, put up like 15 points or so. But can he do that consistently? Because ever since James has gotten there, he's went from being the second option on the offensive end and the guy who typically has the rock in his hand when Joel's not, on the block with it, to now you the third option. And now you got to be the guy who's relegated to catch and shoot duty, being an active cutter, and being a defender. And I think he hasn't really gotten accustomed to that role fully yet. And as a result, Philly has struggled a great deal. I still think James is, in spite of, some of the greatness he's shown there early on, he's still seeking to get adjusted and accustomed to playing alongside of a big like Joel Embiid, who's very ball dominant. And, and those two guys got to learn how to take turns and play off of one another. And one thing, as much as I love James and watching him as a player, that he's always had to deal with when he's played with so many talented pieces like he has, is how to adjust to those guys and being willing to do something that he typically hasn't shown a willingness to do for every player. And that's playing off the ball sometimes and being active off the ball and moving. That to me is what's going to be the make it or break it thing for Philadelphia. And if it's one team that I don't think Philadelphia will want to see in the playoffs, it will probably be Toronto. Because with all those wing defenders that they have, that they can bring on the Harden and check him, and then with the length and the versatility that they have to go inside and protect the paint, that's a nightmare matchup. If they were to play their way into the 3 seed and Toronto, stays at 6, where I believe they currently are, like that would be a hell of a first round matchup that wouldn't be easy. And it would really require Joel to put up 30 and 15 every single night.
Yeah, definitely. We'll see how that plays out with Philly. I think they're gonna stay in that 4 or 5 range myself. I think the Bulls may be bound to with them in that way, but you got Boston may figure in that as well. We spoke a little bit about that before the game tonight, but again, I just want to go back to the Nets and Bucks before we wrap up. Like, Reggie was on there being goofy, talking about, yeah, you want to see that in the first round. I'm like, come on, man. But in some ways, it may be prudent to say that may be the only series we need to see in the East, like, especially coming off of what they did last year together. Like, I mean, the East may likely come down to those two one way or another. Like, and personally, I think I don't know. I could see it going a lot of ways, but if they do face off in any round, they likely will go 7 because they seem to just it's like Darth Vader and Obi-Wan going against each other. Like, they just know all each other's moves, and they just battle each other so evenly. No matter who's out there, it's crazy.
What's the X factor in the series between those two? Because I look at it like, Durant and Giannis, they kind of neutralize each other. Drummond it's a favorable matchup because Drummond gets to basically be on the court more to contest the bigs that Milwaukee has. Kyrie, he's gonna dazzle regardless of matchup. But a guy like Middleton, we saw in the playoffs last year, he's capable of putting up 30, 40 any night. So I mean, there are a lot of factors in that series that can neutralize each other. Does it boil down to like the fringe input? Does Bobby Portis win a series for you because he's capable of putting up numbers and maybe Milwaukee doesn't have, or excuse me, Brooklyn doesn't have someone off of their bench who can match that.
Well, the funny thing is that when you look at last year's series, Portis wasn't a factor because he wasn't getting no play, and then you see him in the Suns series, and he was pretty much almost the X factor in that series. So it'll be interesting to see how much the X factor may be coaching, and does Budenholzer get in his own way, or does he do what he's supposed to? Does he learn from last year and let Kerr get in his own way, which we've seen happen with Kerr, and we can in some ways expect with him as a coach, being a younger coach and everything like that. So, you know, that may be the X factor. Just took a look at some of the stats from tonight, and I think you got to look at some of these outside shooters on both sides as being key. You know, Connaughton, Wesley Matthews, and I think Drew Holiday, when he's really going, he's so unguardable. You know, he's really a guy who can impact the game in a lot of different ways, and that put a lot of strain on a next team who's already questioned so much in the way that they, really let a lot of possessions go on defense. So, I would say as far as X factors go, maybe Drew would probably be the biggest one on Milwaukee's side, and on Brooklyn's side, you may be looking at Bruce Brown had like 23 tonight, somebody like that, or maybe Seth with his shooting. Like there's players in this series, and this is interesting, like how the rosters have adjusted and sort of evolved a little bit even from last year with some new talent and infused in this series potentially.
Yeah.
I think it's gonna come down to the bigs. One thing about playoff basketball is it's all about rebounding.
Mm.
If you look at if you want to look at a game by stat sheet in the playoffs, 9 times out of 10, the team that is leading in the rebounding category is the one that's winning, especially when it comes to the series. I think Brook Lopez is going to be a significant key piece for the Bucks as well. Everybody talks about Drew, but he's really like the backline anchor of Milwaukee's defense, who allows Giannis to do a lot of roaming around freely and whatnot, and to use his athleticism like we've seen him do these last several years since Brook has been attacked in Milwaukee. So I look at those guys as key pieces, and it could come down to coaching as well, Cal, because I had a lot of issue with Budenholzer last year, allowing Giannis sometimes to operate in the perimeter, which we saw change when he got to the conference finals and he got into the finals and put him on that block, which is where he was supposed to be operating. And as we see, it led to significant dividends for the Bucks franchise in the World Championship.
Yeah, like I say, Budenholzer got to show some evolution in his coaching this year, at least in that matchup. Like I say, he could do whatever he wants in the other matchups probably, but with this Nets matchup, if he doesn't want to stress it as much as they did last year, he's got to, do some different things with his guys this year. And Gabe, I look at the rebound, and you make a good point again, man. 57-41 tonight. The Bucks out rebounded them, so that pretty much helped kick them in the game. That they had a nice free throw advantage too. 82%, made 28 of 34 compared to 11 of 16 for the Nets. Points in the paint, 54-38 advantage for Milwaukee there too. They didn't shoot well tonight. Too well, I should say. Milwaukee did. They about 45 overall. They shot horribly from 3, 12 or 41. So, they in that way, when you shooting on them threes, they trying to play the game like the Nets. That didn't work. They gotta be big on the Nets, and that's what they were able to do that as well, especially towards the end, and that's what got them this win tonight. But yeah. Like I said, fellas, man, I ain't gonna keep y'all too much longer, man. Y'all got anything else y'all want to throw out about tonight?
Not for me. I'm really looking forward to seeing how the Bulls respond against Miami on Saturday.
Yeah. Hopefully, like we mentioned before the game, you wasn't in this game, but cause the way the Bulls been playing, like on and off. Yeah. Me and Farrell had predicted that they were going to win tonight, but Drew was like, well, they might be off again tonight and pick it up again on Saturday. So now you got to, if hopefully that trend is over. Like, that's why I'm saying, like, hopefully tonight was an over the hump game. and now that they set a new, they've reset themselves, hopefully. But if they're trending again in that on off, sort of pattern, that's not going to look well for Saturday. But like you say, Phil, hopefully they can keep up the momentum from the night, be confident, play. They got to have a better start tonight. So better start Saturday than they had tonight against Miami. But yeah, hopefully we'll see more of what we saw tonight against Miami.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. And they should be motivated to come out, and set the tone, especially after what went down in Miami. And that they got beat on that Monday night in February. At this point, every game should be treated like a playoff game by the Bulls. This is a young team. They're going to get a test every single night. So now is the time to start ramping up. And now is the time, to really see what this team is made of. I take a more laid back approach watching NBA basketball than probably most people. So I'm interested just to see how this team that's filled with a lot of young players seeks to adapt to the now being in a new environment, which is playoff basketball, where the game slows down and every, decision you make on the floor is magnified. So they got to come with it. But one thing that really impressed me the most just watching NBA tonight is what Trae Young's doing in Atlanta, man. On the verge of potentially, vying for a scoring title in a race that's very close. As it could come down to literally LeBron, Giannis, Luka, and him, and leading the league in assists. With a depleted Hawks roster, having these guys within the thick of the play-in race. If these guys could get in healthy, you never know. We saw what they did last year under Nate McMillan and Trae. I mean, what he's doing in the pick and roll right now is ridiculous for a fourth-year guard. It's Chris Paul-like and it's veteran-like. He's looking like a 10-year vet out there, and the way he's dominating the game, even when he's not scoring, it shows the evolution of his game in a lot of ways. And I'm very excited to see him continue on and building off of that.
Yeah, they could be very dangerous, guys. Like they're in that 10th spot. That's why I said, man, I think I could see any number of things happening looking at those playing games.
Yeah.
Like, you got them at 10, the Hornets at 9, the Nets, and then the Cavs. Like, who knows how those teams will match up against each other? We're talking one and out. So, who knows how those games can play out, man. It's like you say, they can be very dangerous still, those Hawks there. So, yeah. Man, great night of basketball, man. This
for sure.
Like I said, for a while it looked like a little bit of a downer for the Bulls. Gabe, I admire you, man. I know you're gonna keep you ain't gonna get your heart pressure up with these Bulls, but I think a lot of Bulls fans gonna need some medicine or something by the end of this playoff run.
Yeah, I agree with you on that one. I've been paying attention, having a lot of conversations with Bulls fans lately. I know how they're gonna be. It's still like those old expectations with Mike in the 90s. It's never left.
I mean, you see on Bulls Twitter, man. It's people are living and dying with these games, but it's better. It's better to at least have that emotion in it again than
absolutely
than to be. We've had so many years where at this point it's like, we're only looking towards where we're going to fall in a lottery. What's the lottery going to be like? Who's going to be available to us in that college draft, and but now it's back again. It's playoff time again, and it started early for the Bulls. But for better or worse, that may be what they needed.
Absolutely. I mean, you can tell the energy has changed around the franchise. Just going to the 2 games I went to this season. Comparing it to prior to COVID hitting. When fans were in the building, it was different. Those boiling years, it was rough. Like I wouldn't even go to games unless they was playing contenders. Or a top 5 player was coming into town. So even when I had guys like, hey, I got tickets. I'm like, man, I'd rather go up to Milwaukee now.
Mm-hmm.
You see it. You seeing these guys come up in here and they're growing. Zach has always had it, but to see him, evolve into an all-star, to see DeMar, a vet, a steady presence, a veteran, and a star in his own right, coming in here and having a magical season, and getting a real coach in the building with Billy Donovan. They got something that they're cooking up. And I'm more excited to see what's to come from the Bulls as they seek to grow, because after this season, as we know, with them getting back in the playoffs for the first time in 5 years, the expectations will be magnified even more this summer and beyond.
Yes, indeed. And for all those times coming up, you can keep up with the Bulls and the rest of the NBA with us here, running with WARR, Gabe, Pharaoh. You see the tags right there, man. Follow these guys on Twitter for more good talk like this about hoops and everything else. And yeah, we're gonna keep it rolling, keep it riding. Next week we'll have another new show. Probably should be a more conventional show back next week. But this went pretty good today, splitting it up, doing the pre and the post game. We on some Bulls outsider stuff. They ain't the only ones out there who can do that. So, shout out to those fellas, and shout out to everybody else on Bulls Twitter, and everybody who was everybody who enjoyed the festivities tonight. Shout out to you, and hopefully those Bulls can keep it going Saturday and beyond. But for now, this is me, Kyle Mean, signing off. Gabe, Pharaoh, everybody else, Drew. Shout out to Drew, who was on with us earlier, and all our other fellas out there. Chris, Josh. We'll see them soon again on the show. But until then, y'all keep it rolling, keep it peace, and keep bouncing.
The show.
Yes, sir.